Yes, we are back again, historians, with another video. And in this video, we'll be discussing your specific objective, which is explain why all the victors did not get everything they wanted. In the first lesson, we discussed about the big three. So now we'll go on to discuss or explain why the victors did not get everything they wanted. So we are still under the theme of international relations since 1990, Treaty of Versailles and its impact 1919 up to 1923. So we have our general objectives according to the grade 10 and 11 history syllabus. Learners will understand whether the peace treaty of 1919 was fair. So this is just a general objective. If you look at your syllabus, you will see this is just a general objective. But the specific objectives of today is that learners should be able to explain why all the victors did not give everything they wanted. You can get a question in grade 10 or grade 11 history asking you to describe or explain why all the victors did not get everything they wanted. You might get a C question, so you will have to explain. So sometimes you have to explain on both sides and all that thing. So for this video, we'll be explaining why all the victors did not get everything they wanted. Historians, you have to be aware that I am not giving you everything. I'm actually just trying to make you understand how to answer history questions and how to explain like a historian. So this somehow, some way, it's also like critical thinking. Yeah. So there we have our question: why did the victors not get everything that they wanted? Okay, let's go in. Different victors wanted different things. When we are talking about the victors, we are talking about the people that won the First World War: USA, Britain, France, and whichever nation was fighting on the victor side. So those people won the First World War. So let's say different victors wanted different things, so they could not all have everything they wanted. Britain and France did not want a League of Nations, so there you have another nation or two nations not wanting a League of Nations, But Wilson insisted on little else. Remember, Wilson is coming from the USA, and the USA did not really experience much damage as compared to Britain and France. So that's why their aims and motives are contradicting each other. So here you have Clemencia, who wanted crippling reparations. Wilson and Lloyd George did not want this. Wilson wanted to avoid another war, so that's why he did not want reparations. He thought that if we impose, or if they had imposed huge reparations, or if they had demanded huge reparation from Germany, then Germany would want revenge. But he was right, even so he was right. So there you have your first reason of it. Different victors, wanting different things. So and you can also build on that explanation by saying it's not even that the victors didn't try to get everything they wanted. They pushed things to the point where in March 1990 the conference was about to break up failure, and Lloyd George had to step in and push through his Fontainebleau memorandum, where he forced Wilson to accept reparations. Remember, Wilson and George. Wilson and George did not want reparations in the first presentation, but now Lloyd George is now trying to convince Wilson to accept reparation and Clemenza to accept the League of Nations. So the eventual Treaty of Versailles, it is rather obvious to say, had to be a compromise. By definition, not getting all you want. So that is a good explanation. You explain it to me in examination. Obviously, I will give you what you deserve. So we have our second reason why the victors did not get everything they wanted. Moreover, it was not as though the victors had only themselves to think about. Perhaps if they had gone to Versailles thinking only of themselves, some of their leaders would have not gotten everything that they wanted, excuse me there. But the leaders, as Wilson pointed out in his opening speech, had much more to do at Versailles than get something for themselves. The world was in ruins after the Greatest War ever. So you cannot go into a peace conference only thinking about yourself. Think about the people, how they were affected by the war. You have to put those people into consideration, and also you have to put public. You have to put the public at heart. Public opinion. So those things they matter because the First World War really affected people, different people in many ways. Yeah. So there we continue again. Why did the victors not get everything they wanted? In Eastern Europe, three great empires had collapsed, and there were literally no countries at all. The big three were very aware that it was their job not just to get what they wanted, but to rule the world, to make it safe for democracy. That was especially the vision behind Wilson's 14 points and the League of Nations, but Lloyd George too felt the need for justice and peace. Remember, after the greatest war ever, three great empires, that is the Otto-Hungarian Empire, the German, Austrian Empire, all those, they collapsed, and they were literally no countries. The big three were very aware that it was their job. They knew that it was their job to put everything, in order. Not like in order, but it was their responsibility to contribute towards rebuilding a nation that was distracted by the First World War. So they did not only have to think about this themselves, they had to think about the people, and they had to think about also rebuilding the nation, and also to make the world a democracy. A democracy is I believe that you have freedom of speech, freedom of press, you have rights and all that, and you can practice all those rights. So that is democracy. That was especially the vision behind Wilson's 14 points. Remember, Wilson came up with his 14 points, and but in the 14th point, he also mentioned the League of Nations, the need to have the League of Nations, but Lloyd George still felt that they need the justice in the peace, So there we have our next slide, and we continue again why people did not get everything that they wanted. So even without those higher motives, remember the big three had aims and motives. Even without those higher motives, however, there were plenty of people who were not prepared to allow the big three just to think of themselves and no one else. So they are saying that people or the public wouldn't just allow these three leaders to think of themselves. No, the public was there to pressure them. we want this, we have to give in to the public's demands also. Thousands of lobbyists, went to Paris to try to get what they wanted. For example, Queen Mary of Romania or a delegation of 20 Ukrainians amidst a clamor of demands. Those are all people in the public domain, many of which were directly conflicted. Example, American Zionists who wanted Palestine for the Jews versus Arab delegates who wanted Palestine for the Arabs. You can see conflicting demands. Things that I want is going against what you want. Conflicting. Yeah. The answer to why the victors did not get everything they wanted is the simple truth is you cannot please all of the people all of the time. So, which means you cannot save all the people. You have to save some, then others you sacrifice. I'm not saying that in a critical situation you should do that, but in a critical situation you should explore all the options. So there we have our final slide. And this is our fourth reasons to why the book does not get a complexity. There's another reason. When you sit in the pub pontificating, everything seems so easy, but the real world is much more complicated. How, for example, how do you sort out the principle of self-determination in which Hungary, which was evidently populated mainly by Hungarians, but which was peppered with small enclaves of Germans who had emigrated there centuries earlier? So, politics is something that is, or let's say history is something that you have to look at with an open eye. You see, you have to look at the things and evaluate it, analyze it, and see how those things also determine whether the victors will get everything they want. So, for me, Mr. Mware, this is the end of this lesson, and I believe the next lesson will be on the impacts or the effects of the Treaty of Versailles. So until next time, historians, especially grade 10 and grade 11 historians, these contents are for you. So there we have the end of our slide. Wonderful.